Don't pretend you belong here, sweetheart. This seat isn't for your kind. The sentence hit like a slap wrapped in a smile. Heads turned. Coffee froze midair. Somewhere near row 3, someone let out a quiet gasp. The flight attendant's manicured hand cut across the aisle like a stop sign no one dared to challenge. Her voice was firm, rehearsed, and dripping with something far heavier than authority. Dr. Naomi Brooks did not move. She stood still in her powder blue suit, eyes locked, posture straight as a verdict. The cabin light reflected off her glasses, but her expression stayed unreadable, too calm for the insult that had just split the air open. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter because silence has never saved anyone. Now, back to Naomi. The aisle between them felt like a border. Behind Naomi, murmurs started, half whispers, half judgment. A man in a navy blazer leaned toward his wife. "She probably wandered up here," he said, smirking. His wife nodded, clutching her champagne glass a little tighter, as if proximity could stain her. Naomi held out her boarding pass. Her voice was quiet, deliberate. "Seat 2, A, purchased, confirmed." The flight attendant didn't even look. "We have premium guests boarding. Please return to economy before this gets unpleasant." The word premium landed like a coded reminder who deserves comfort and who doesn't. Naomi blinked once. "Run my name again." The attendant frowned, folding her arms. "I don't need to. I know this seat. It belongs to someone who can afford it." Gasps, a beat of silence that felt longer than turbulence. The woman in seat 2A, a middle-aged passenger with a designer tote and pearl earrings, shifted uncomfortably, then looked away. The cabin temperature didn't change, but it felt colder. Naomi's grip on her purse stayed steady. Her voice carried calm authority, the kind born from years of being tested in rooms just like this. "You are making a mistake," she said. The attendant smirked. "The only mistake is thinking a fancy bag makes you first class." The insult landed, but Naomi didn't blink. Her silence was not weakness, it was calculation. She had been told before to wait her turn, told she was out of place in boardrooms she built, told she looked too casual to lead the company she owned. Every time she remembered the same truth. Power speaks loudest when it doesn't have to raise its voice. A man 2 rows back started filming on his phone. A quiet click, a red light. The attendant noticed, hissed through her teeth, "Sir, no recording." But the man didn't stop. He whispered, "People need to see this." The plane hadn't even left the gate, and yet the air already felt like a courtroom. Naomi turned her head slightly, scanning the faces around her, some pitying, some indifferent, some hungry for spectacle. Then she spoke again, softly but with precision. "If you want to know who belongs here, check the ownership records." The attendant scoffed. "Excuse me?" Naomi adjusted her glasses. "You're talking to one of the investors who keeps this plane in the air." For a moment, even the hum of the engine seemed to pause. The attendant blinked, confusion crawling into her composure. "That's impossible." Naomi didn't argue. She simply said, "Run my name again." And this time, her tone wasn't a request. It was a warning. The flight attendant hesitated, her smirk faltering for the first time. "Ma'am, please do not make a scene." Naomi's voice remained even. "I am not making a scene. I am standing in the seat that I paid for." The passengers shifted in their leather seats, the quiet sound of discomfort filling the cabin. Somewhere in the second row, a man cleared his throat, as if preparing to speak but choosing not to. The woman with the pearls in seat 2A glanced down, pretending to check her phone, her reflection trembling on the dark screen. The attendant glanced toward the cockpit, signaling for someone. Within seconds, another crew member appeared, taller, broader, and equally dismissive. His name tag read, Brian. He looked Naomi up and down before speaking. "What seems to be the problem here?" Nicole, the first attendant, gestured sharply. "She claims this is her seat, but I checked the list. It belongs to a Mr. Franklin." Naomi met Brian's gaze without flinching. "Then you should check again, because I am Dr. Naomi Brooks, and this is my seat." Brian gave a small, amused laugh, the kind meant to remind people of their place. "Doctor or not, this section is reserved for our premium clients." "Premium?" Naomi repeated softly. "That is an interesting word." Nicole crossed her arms, her red scarf catching the overhead light. We cannot hold up boarding for this. Please return to economy before we call security. The words hung heavy, a threat dressed as procedure. The cabin fell into that strange hush that happens right before someone crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. Naomi stayed still. The silence became its own rebellion. From across the aisle, a young woman in a gray uniform hesitated. Her name tag read, Mia, trainee. She looked from Naomi to Nicole, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. She started carefully. I actually saw this ticket scan green. Seat 2A was confirmed. Maybe there's a glitch in the manifest. Nicole turned sharply, her tone slicing through the air. Mia, stay out of this. You are new. You do not understand how things work here. But Mia did not move. I understand what I saw, she said quietly. A low murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers began whispering, glancing at Naomi, then back at the crew. One man muttered, "This is unbelievable." Another woman pulled out her phone, pressing record. Nicole's composure cracked for a moment, her cheeks flushing pink. "Stop recording. This is a private airline matter." Naomi exhaled slowly, her tone steady, controlled. "Then handle it properly." She held out her ticket once more, firm and unshaken. "Run my name again, or you can keep pretending I do not exist. Either way, I am not moving." Brian folded his arms. "If you refuse to comply, we will have to remove you." Naomi met his stare. "If you touch me, you will lose far more than your job." The cabin stilled again. The words did not sound like a threat. They sounded like a fact. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the voice from the cockpit intercom broke the silence. "Flight attendants, please finalize pre-boarding." Nicole turned, frustrated, and hissed under her breath, "Let me handle this." But Naomi was already dialing a number on her phone. Her tone did not change as she spoke quietly into her earpiece. "Carla, it is happening again. Flight 306, Protocol 7. Begin internal verification." Somewhere, far beyond the cabin, a system began to move. Carla's voice came through Naomi's earpiece, calm and precise. "Protocol 7 is active, Dr. Brooks. We are logging every interaction, voice, and timestamp. Would you like me to alert the legal division?" Naomi's answer was barely above a whisper. "Not yet." Nicole folded her arms tightly, trying to reclaim control. "Excuse me, who exactly are you calling? You are not allowed to use personal devices during boarding." Naomi's gaze was steady. "I am calling my office, the same office that owns part of this airline." The words landed like a dropped weight. Brian frowned, unsure whether to laugh or take a step back. "Owns? That is impossible." Naomi did not respond. She only looked toward Mia, the young trainee still standing near the service cart, phone in hand, eyes wide with conflict. "You said you saw the ticket scan green, correct?" Mia nodded nervously. "Yes, ma'am, I did. The system confirmed your name." "Thank you," Naomi said softly. "That will matter later." Nicole rolled her eyes, but her voice betrayed tension. "You can stop this act, doctor, whatever. We deal with scammers every week. It will not work here." A passenger near the window muttered under his breath, "Scammers do not wear calm like that." Another whispered, "I think she is serious." The aircraft door was still open, sunlight cutting across the aisle like a spotlight. It caught the side of Naomi's face, sharp and still. She did not need volume. Her silence had already taken command of the room. Then, a metallic chime echoed through the cabin. Every flight attendant's tablet vibrated at once. Nicole glanced down at her screen and froze. Across the display, in bold white text, it read, "Aerostar Holdings, priority board member on board. Verify identity immediately." Brian leaned over her shoulder, whispering, "What is this?" Nicole's fingers trembled. "It has to be a system error." Naomi took a step forward, her heels silent against the carpet. "No, that is your verification. Run my name again." When Nicole finally did, the tablet blinked once, then confirmed, "Dr. Naomi Brooks, investor, Aerostar Holdings, Tier 1 shareholder." The silence that followed felt electric. Every passenger who had been whispering now sat frozen, caught between shame and awe. Mia's voice broke through, shaky but clear. "I told you she was real." Nicole's throat worked hard before words came out. I do not understand. You are one of the owners?" Naomi's expression did not soften. "I am one of the people who believed this airline could represent something better than this." Brian stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck, searching for the authority he no longer had. We did not know. That, Naomi said, her tone low, is exactly the problem. In the back rows, phones glowed brighter. Someone whispered, "It is already online." The video of the confrontation had hit social media, climbing fast. The hashtag number Aerostar racism was already spreading like wildfire. Naomi took her seat in 2A, calm, deliberate, reclaiming the space that had been stolen from her minutes earlier. She placed her phone face down on the tray table and exhaled. Across from her, Nicole stood stiff, her authority collapsing in real time. She opened her mouth as if to apologize, but Naomi stopped her with one quiet sentence. "Save it for the hearing. They will want to know every word you said." And just like that, the power had shifted. The chime of the cabin speakers interrupted the tension. "Attention, crew. Secure the cabin for departure." The pilot's voice was calm, unaware that the real turbulence had already begun inside the aircraft. Naomi stayed seated, eyes fixed forward. She could feel the weight of every stare pressing against her back. Nicole stood motionless by the galley, her red scarf no longer a mark of pride but of panic. Brian leaned toward her, whispering under his breath, "What do we do now?" Nicole's answer was barely audible. "She cannot just sit there, can she?" Naomi spoke without turning her head. "You may continue your duties, unless humiliation has replaced your schedule." A ripple of laughter escaped from somewhere in the cabin, short and nervous. The tension cracked like glass under heat. Nicole flushed red, but said nothing. Mia approached cautiously, her voice low. "Dr. Brooks, do you need anything? A drink? Maybe some water?" Naomi turned to her, a rare softness flickering in her tone. "Thank you, Mia. I need nothing but the truth, and you have already provided it." The young trainee nodded, eyes shining with relief and fear all at once. She retreated quietly, her presence a quiet reminder that courage does not require rank. Across the aisle, a man whispered, "I cannot believe what just happened." His wife replied, "Believe it. We just saw power disguised as patience." Naomi rested her hands on her lap. Her phone buzzed once. Carla's voice returned through her earpiece. "The system verification is complete. Internal compliance has received the incident feed. We are now live streaming to the corporate board channel." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Good. Keep the stream running. Do not cut a second." Carla hesitated before adding, "The video from passengers is also circulating on social media. It has reached 70,000 views in less than 5 minutes." Naomi let out a slow breath. "Then let the world see what bias looks like in uniform." The flight attendants huddled near the service area, whispering frantically. Nicole's hands trembled as she held her tablet. Brian whispered, "She can ruin us." "She already has," Nicole muttered, voice breaking slightly. From seat 3C, a gray-haired man leaned forward. "Ma'am," he said to Naomi, "if I may thank you for not losing your temper, most of us would have." Naomi gave a faint nod. Anger is a luxury, justice is not. Her tone was calm, but her presence filled the space like a storm preparing to break. Moments later, the captain stepped out from the cockpit, his uniform sharp, his authority absolute, or so it seemed. "What is going on here?" he demanded. "We have a flight to run." Nicole straightened, trying to recover her confidence. "Captain Pierce, there was a mix-up with a passenger. She claims to be—" Naomi stood before she could finish. "I do not claim. I confirm. I am Dr. Naomi Brooks, investor and shareholder of Aerostar Holdings." The captain's eyes flicked to the tablet in Nicole's hands, reading the flashing notice himself. His face drained of color. "This cannot be." Naomi stepped closer, her voice low and unwavering. "It can, and it is." For the first time, the captain did not have an order to give. The cabin, once his domain, now belonged entirely to her. And as the engines roared to life outside, every person inside that plane understood. This flight would not be remembered for where it landed, but for who refused to be moved. Captain Pierce's jaw tightened, the weight of authority pressing against his composure. "Dr. Brooks," he said carefully, "this is highly irregular. We were not informed that an investor was aboard this flight." Naomi's tone stayed calm, deliberate. "Irregularity happens when training fails. You were informed, your staff simply chose not to see." The captain glanced at Nicole, who stood stiff beside him, hands clasped behind her back like a soldier awaiting judgment. "Is that true?" he asked. Nicole hesitated, her throat dry. "Captain, I followed procedure. Her ticket did not match. Naomi cut in quietly but sharply. It matched perfectly. What did not match was your expectation of who belongs in seat 2A. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Passengers shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them. The silence had gravity now. Mia, the young trainee, stepped forward again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, I scanned the ticket myself. It went green. It was valid." Every head turned toward her. Nicole spun around, her face flushing. "Mia, not another word." But the girl didn't stop. Her hands trembled, yet her tone was steady. "I know what I saw. I do not want to be part of something wrong." The captain stared at her, then at Naomi, realizing that this was no longer a misunderstanding, it was evidence unfolding in real time. From the rows behind, a few passengers began recording again. Phones raised, the red lights of their cameras reflecting off the polished cabin walls. Someone whispered, "She's standing up for her." Another murmured, "This is history right here." Naomi turned slightly toward Mia, her expression softening. "Thank you," she said, quiet but sincere. "Integrity is the rarest uniform." Nicole's composure broke. "This is getting out of hand," she snapped. "She is turning this cabin into a circus." Naomi looked directly at her. "No, you did that the moment you tore my ticket." A murmur rippled through the passengers. The captain rubbed his temples. "Enough," he said, voice rising. "We will handle this once we land." Naomi leaned forward slightly. "No, Captain, you will handle this now." "How?" He blinked, thrown by the calm authority in her tone. "Now?" "Yes," she said, "because the longer you wait, the more lives this moment touches." Carla's voice returned through Naomi's earpiece. "Dr. Brooks, corporate compliance is requesting a live statement from you. The feed has crossed 120,000 viewers." Naomi nodded slightly. "Understood." She tapped her phone once, then looked directly at the captain. "Would you like to say anything before they hear mine?" Captain Pierce froze. The screens in the flight deck flickered as the internal broadcast connected to headquarters. On every crew tablet, the same message appeared. "Internal Ethics Review. Live." Nicole covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God." Naomi straightened her jacket and looked down the aisle. Every pair of eyes was on her now. "If anyone wonders why this matters," she began, voice firm but low, "it is because prejudice does not wear a uniform, it hides inside one." Her words cut through the silence. Somewhere in the back, applause began softly, hesitant, then grew louder, spreading forward like a wave of awakening. Naomi did not smile. She only said, "Now, Captain, shall we begin the real flight?" And for the first time since boarding, no one dared to look away. The cabin was no longer a place of travel, it had become a courtroom in the sky. Every breath felt heavy, measured against the weight of what had just unfolded. Captain Pierce stood frozen, his hand resting on the back of the nearest seat. The authority in his uniform suddenly felt thinner than the air outside. Naomi stayed composed, voice calm but carrying the kind of certainty that silences a crowd. "Captain," she said, "before we take off, I need confirmation that this flight crew understands the policy on passenger profiling." He hesitated. "Dr. Brooks, with all respect, this is not the proper setting." "It is exactly the proper setting," she interrupted, her tone sharp but steady. "Because discrimination does not wait for a meeting. It happens in real time, right here, in front of the passengers who paid to watch it." Nicole's lip trembled. "We did not discriminate. We were following safety procedures." Naomi turned her head slowly toward her. "Safety? Tell me, what part of my skin threatened your flight plan?" Gasps filled the cabin. The words landed harder than turbulence. Brian looked away, ashamed. Even the sound of the engines warming up seemed to fade beneath the weight of Naomi's question. Mia took a small step closer, speaking up again. "She is right," the young trainee said, her voice shaking. "You told me once that we should treat everyone with respect, no matter what class they sit in. That is what I was trained to do." Nicole snapped back, voice cracking under the pressure. "You are out of line, Mia." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "No." "She is finally in line with her conscience." The captain exhaled, realizing there was no saving face. "Dr. Brooks," he said, "please allow me to apologize on behalf of the crew." Naomi's expression softened slightly, but her words were deliberate. "Apologies repair feelings, not systems. I am interested in systems." Her phone buzzed again. Carla's voice came through clearly, amplified just enough that the passengers nearby could hear. "Dr. Brooks, the board has joined the stream. They are observing the situation live. Do you want to proceed with the incident report? Naomi nodded. Proceed, Carla continued. Under corporate policy, the involved staff members will be flagged for suspension pending review. Do you confirm authorization? Naomi's tone did not change. Confirmed. Nicole's head snapped up. You cannot just, Naomi interrupted softly, almost kindly. I can. And I already have. The captain's tablet chimed. He looked down and saw the notification. Crew under review. Immediate suspension pending audit. The color drained from his face. This is already active, he whispered. Naomi leaned back slightly in her seat. That is what happens when accountability takes flight faster than denial. For a long moment, no one moved. Then a voice from the back, an older woman clutching her handbag, spoke out, trembling but resolute. Thank you, she said, for not letting them make you small. The cabin filled with murmurs of agreement. A man added, This is what real composure looks like. Another said, This is why people film, so the world remembers. Naomi turned her gaze toward the aisle, the corners of her mouth steady. I do not need a camera, she said softly. I have the truth. And as the plane prepared to close its doors, the atmosphere shifted once again, not in fear, but in awareness. Something inside that cabin had changed permanently. They all knew it, and none of them would ever look at a boarding pass the same way again. The doors of the aircraft finally closed with a hollow click, sealing everyone inside a silence that felt charged with consequence. The air was thick, almost metallic, filled with the hum of the engines and the unease of realization. Every passenger could sense it, something irreversible had already begun. Nicole stood near the galley, pale, her once perfect posture collapsing into the shape of regret. Captain, she whispered, you have to reverse this. You cannot let her do this to us. Captain Pierce stared at his tablet, the corporate notification glowing bright. Suspension in effect. Await legal directive. He exhaled heavily. It is out of my hands now, Nicole. You brought this on yourself. Naomi watched quietly from her seat in 2A. She was not gloating. She was documenting. The stillness in her face said more than triumph. It said history was repeating itself, and this time she would make sure it ended differently. Carla's voice returned through the earpiece. Dr. Brooks, news outlets have begun picking up the story. Would you like to issue a statement? Naomi replied evenly. Not yet. Let them speculate first. Silence has its own power. Passengers whispered among themselves. That is her, right? The aviation investor? One man asked. A woman across the aisle nodded. Yes, she was in Forbes last spring. She owns part of this airline. Nicole heard the words and flinched. Her voice cracked as she tried one last defense. Dr. Brooks, please. I never meant to offend you personally. Naomi turned her head slowly, her eyes calm but piercing. You did not offend me. You offended an entire idea that respect must be earned through appearance. The statement settled like thunder rolling through the fuselage. A few passengers nodded quietly. Mia, standing near the beverage cart, was openly crying now, not out of fear, but relief. Naomi's tone softened. Mia, do not cry. You did what most people are too afraid to do. You saw something wrong and you said it out loud. The trainee sniffled and nodded. I could not let it happen again. Naomi looked at her, voice low but steady. Good, because that is how change starts, one voice that refuses to go quiet. Captain Pierce adjusted his collar, trying to reassert authority, but his words came out weaker than he intended. Dr. Brooks, if we proceed with takeoff, may I request that we resolve the disciplinary matter after landing? Naomi met his eyes. Proceed with takeoff, Captain, but understand resolution has already begun. He nodded, humbled. Yes, ma'am. As he walked back toward the cockpit, the passengers broke into soft, spontaneous applause. It was not loud, not coordinated. It was the kind of applause that grows from witnessing something human and undeniable. Naomi did not react to it. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, remembering another time, another room when she had been 22, sitting in a bank office, told she was too risky for a business loan. That same tone, that same doubt, and now, decades later, the same quiet power of reversal. When she opened her eyes again, the aircraft began to move, taxiing toward the runway. Nicole, red-eyed, whispered, I am sorry. Naomi replied without bitterness. You will be, but not because of me, because truth never forgets its witnesses. Outside, sunlight flashed across the wings as the plane accelerated, carrying justice to 30,000 feet. Inside, no one spoke not out of fear, but out of respect. The kind that cannot be forced, only earned. The aircraft lifted into the sky, engines roaring like a verdict being read aloud. The city below turned into a blur of light and distance, while inside, the cabin stayed tense and strangely reverent. No one reached for the call button. No one dared to whisper. The passengers had traded their curiosity for respect. Naomi sat motionless in seat 2A, eyes fixed on the faint clouds beyond the window. The blue outside matched the calm inside her, but not the silence. It was heavier now. The kind that comes after truth has been spoken too clearly to be ignored. Carla's voice came through her earpiece again. Dr. Brooks, the footage from passenger devices is now circulating across 4 major news outlets. The headline reads, "Investor humiliated in her own airline's first-class cabin. Would you like me to respond?" Naomi answered quietly, "No statements yet. Let them tell the story their way. The truth will correct itself." Nicole, now seated in the jump seat near the galley, kept her head low, fingers twisting nervously at her scarf. Every few minutes, her eyes flicked toward Naomi, as if hoping for forgiveness she knew would not come quickly. Brian leaned against the cabin wall, muttering, "We are finished." Naomi turned slightly toward him. "You are not finished. You are learning. What you do after this decides which it will be." The words hit him harder than accusation. His eyes lowered in shame. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. From behind, Mia approached again with a bottle of water. "Dr. Brooks," she whispered. "May I offer this?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mia. You remind me why I started my company, to prove that decency still exists somewhere between fear and power." The young trainee nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "People online are already saying you are a hero." Naomi shook her head. "No. Heroes fight to be seen. I am fighting so no one else has to." The engines hummed steadily as the plane climbed higher, piercing through a thin veil of clouds. In that moment, the sunlight hit Naomi's face, and even the most cynical passenger could see it, the quiet strength of someone who had fought this battle too many times and refused to grow bitter. Carla's voice returned once more. "Dr. Brooks, corporate has issued a statement confirming your presence on the flight. The board is asking for your directive regarding the crew involved." Naomi took a slow breath. "Authorize immediate suspension for Nicole Dawson and Brian Keller. Launch a diversity compliance review across all cabin teams. And send an internal message to the staff word for word." Carla asked, "What would you like the message to say?" Naomi looked forward, her tone firm but steady. "Remind them that policy without empathy is just paperwork, and that every seat on this airline is a test of character, not color." As Carla confirmed the directive, a soft ping echoed through every crew tablet on board. Nicole's screen dimmed, showing the message, "Access revoked. Immediate suspension pending review." She exhaled shakily, covering her face with her hands. Naomi turned her gaze back to the window, the horizon now glowing gold against the curve of the earth. "Do not look down, Nicole," she said quietly. "Look forward. That is where the lesson lives." The cabin remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence that follows justice, the kind that changes every. The aircraft leveled at 30,000 feet, gliding steady through an ocean of clouds. Outside, the world looked peaceful, but inside, the air still carried the pulse of what had just happened. It was not tension anymore, it was awakening. Naomi rested her hands on the armrests, posture calm, eyes forward. The intercom beeped once, and Carla's voice returned. "Dr. Brooks, the compliance notice has been issued to all departments. The board has requested a formal statement from you once the aircraft lands." Naomi replied softly, "They will get it, but not as an apology, as a reminder." A flight attendant from economy, a young man named Daniel, walked quietly up the aisle. He paused near Naomi's row, his voice respectful. "Dr. Brooks, I just wanted to say, what they did was wrong. Some of us saw, and we said nothing. That will not happen again." Naomi nodded once. "Then do better when silence tempts you next time. That is how progress begins." He nodded, humbled, and returned to his post. Passengers around Naomi exchanged glances. A woman in business attire leaned over slightly. "I travel every week," she whispered. "I have seen things like this before, but never seen someone face it like you just did." Naomi gave a faint smile. That is because I stopped asking for permission to exist. Her voice was low, but it carried through the cabin. Even those pretending not to listen did. Nicole sat frozen in her jump seat, staring at her inactive tablet. The screen still displayed the notice of suspension, her reflection fractured across the dark surface. She whispered to no one, "How did it get this far?" Naomi's voice answered without looking at her. "It got this far because no one stopped it sooner." Mia, the trainee, stood nearby, eyes wide and full of admiration. "Dr. Brooks," she said quietly, "my mother always told me power does not change people, it shows them." Naomi met her gaze and nodded. "Your mother was right." For the first time since takeoff, the cabin lights dimmed to a softer glow. The hum of the engines evened out, steady and calm, as if the plane itself understood the order that had finally been restored. Naomi turned her eyes to the window, watching sunlight streak across the horizon. "Let this moment travel farther than we do," she murmured, "because the altitude does not make us equal, our actions do." No one replied. They simply listened. And somewhere above the clouds, equality finally felt closer than it ever had before. The seatbelt sign chimed softly, but no one reached for their belts. The passengers sat still, as if afraid to disturb the gravity of the moment. Even the hum of the engines felt gentler, more reverent. Naomi glanced down the aisle. The faces looking back at her were no longer skeptical. They were reflective. The hostility that had filled the cabin earlier had melted into quiet respect and something deeper, recognition. Mia stood near the galley, shoulders squared now. She looked more confident, almost radiant. Naomi gave her a small nod, and that single gesture said everything, a silent passing of courage from one generation to the next. Nicole stared straight ahead, her voice barely audible. "Dr. Brooks, will you report me personally?" Naomi's answer came after a long pause. "No, the report will speak for itself. You already wrote it with your actions." The attendant swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I thought I was protecting the airline." Naomi's tone was calm but final. "You protect something by honoring its values, not by violating them." A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the passengers. One man whispered, "That is the kind of leadership this world needs." Naomi did not acknowledge it. She simply sat back, hands folded, the calm presence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Outside, the sun cut through a sea of white clouds, painting the sky in gold. For the first time since boarding, Naomi allowed herself to exhale fully. What had begun as humiliation had become revelation, and now, at 30,000 feet, the woman they had tried to erase had written her name across the sky. "One who hears it." The cabin lights glowed softly as the aircraft began its descent. A quiet announcement came over the intercom, but few passengers heard it. Their attention was still fixed on Naomi, the calm figure in seat 2A who had turned an act of humiliation into a lesson written in the air. Carla's voice came through Naomi's earpiece once more. "Dr. Brooks, corporate confirms the suspension. Legal has issued termination protocols for the involved staff, pending your final approval." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "Execute them," Carla replied. "Confirmed. Effective immediately." Moments later, both Nicole's and Brian's tablets blinked red before going dark. The sound of the notification was soft, almost delicate, but the meaning was absolute. Their access had been revoked, their positions gone. Nicole gasped quietly, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. "It just logged me out," she whispered. Brian leaned forward, stunned. "It is over." Naomi's tone was even, almost gentle. "No, it is corrected. There is a difference." The passengers looked on, silent witnesses to accountability happening in real time. Some faces showed awe, others relief. A woman near the window crossed her arms and said softly, "Justice really can look like this, quiet, clean, and undeniable." Naomi adjusted her jacket and looked out through the window again. The clouds below were fading into a soft horizon of orange and blue. "Actions have altitude," she murmured, "and some lessons need to travel this high to be seen clearly." The engines lowered their pitch, the cabin tilted slightly, and gravity began to return, but dignity had already risen beyond reach. The aircraft touched down smoothly, tires whispering against the runway. The moment the engines eased, a soft, collective breath escaped the cabin, a sound halfway between relief and reverence. The passengers had witnessed something unforgettable, something that would outlive the flight itself. Naomi stayed seated as the plane taxied to the gate. The golden light of sunset washed across her face, casting long shadows that seemed to honor her calm. Nicole sat in silence, eyes fixed on the floor, her hands still trembling. Mia, standing by the exit door, kept stealing quiet glances at Naomi, as if trying to memorize what courage looked like when it refused to shout. Carla's voice came through one last time. Dr. Brooks, ground security is in position to meet the terminated employees. The press has already gathered outside. Do you wish to make a statement? Naomi's voice was steady, unhurried. No press, no speech. Let the truth travel on its own. Carla hesitated. Understood, ma'am. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers rose slowly, collecting their belongings with unusual care. One man near the back said softly, "Thank you, Dr. Brooks, for reminding us what dignity looks like." Naomi turned slightly toward him, her response calm but certain. Dignity is not given, it is chosen. Mia stepped closer, her voice small but sincere. You changed something today. Naomi offered her a faint smile. No, Mia, you did. You stood up when it mattered. The doors opened with a hiss, and fresh air swept through the cabin. Naomi stood, adjusted her blazer, and took one last look around the faces that had doubted her. The silence that had judged her now softened into quiet respect. She reached for her carry-on, straightened her shoulders, and spoke one final line, her voice steady as the earth beneath them. I do not need to record justice, she said. I am the record. I win. With that, she stepped into the jet bridge, her footsteps echoing with authority earned, not granted. Behind her, passengers remained standing in the aisle, unmoving, as if waiting for the air to clear. In a way, it already had. Outside, cameras flashed against the evening sky, but Naomi did not look back. Justice had already landed quietly, completely, and exactly where it needed to.